If you're anything like me, your flight sim habits are completely chaotic. One day you're managing minute guidance at flight level 380 in an airliner, and the next you're rapping through canyons at Mach 1.2 in a fighter jet. Finding a throttle quadrant that fits both of these worlds without breaking the bank or taking up your entire desk has been next to impossible. Until now. This is the Moza MTQ Throttle Quadrant. It's modular, features 4 independent axes, packs 23 physical controls, and boosts an interchangeable lever system for fighter, Airbus and Boeing styles. I've already unboxed it, as you can see, and we're gonna look today at how you can use the Moza Cockpit app to configure the joystick and calibrate the joystick before using it in combination with Flight Simulator 2024. And of course we're gonna do 2 grueling test flights, one with a heavy airliner and of course one with a jet fighter, the FA18 Hornet. Let's see if this modular solution is the ultimate all-rounder or it makes too many compromises. So let's have a look at the Moza. It's now connected to my PC, and the first leveler which we are gonna visit is that one which can be used to control the spoiler. As you can see, I will move it around now, and that last part, if I push it back, so this is full brake or full spoiler, and then you can see that it fills into a slot and I can push it forward to activate the spoiler. Then next to the flaps there's that connection for that optional handset which you can put on, right? So currently, let's say the jet fighter ones are connected, and you need to make sure that you push the throttle or the handset really strong to the base, because else it might not work correctly, it might not detect all the buttons, as you will see later on in this video. Then after that we of course have a lot of buttons, both on the handsets or the throttles, as well as on the base unit. You see A1 to A4, but you also see those lights which are illuminating, which are mainly used to control the autopilot. A1 to A4 are freely programmable. There are no, let's say, stickers or something delivered with the throttle. And then if we move to the right part, we can see both those blinking buttons, but also those round buttons. And those round buttons are really nice because you can turn them, but you can also push them. So actually there are, say, 3 buttons in one. The switch, you can simply move it up and back, as well as for the gray one. And the one above the gray one, the blinking one, that can be moved to the left and to the right. And if you release it, it will be centering. The one on the right top can be set in multiple positions. I didn't find a really use case for it, but maybe you can. Then I'm a little bit out of focus, but hey, let's go back to that handset and let's see how it can be moved. You can see that I can move it, and you can see also that plastic part, which would say kind of is the lock to either push it into afterburner mode or to go into detent mode. This part of the joystick is nice, but I felt a little bit weak. I'm not sure if it's me, but let's say it worked, let's say that, but it felt that it could potentially break after using it a lot of times, but that's of course something I can't, I would say, decide because I only used it for a few days. Then we've got the flaps, which we can of course move into the different positions. So overall it's a super nice joystick, it's super light. And on the back we've got 2 connections. We've got the connection for the USB, which we can connect directly to the PC, or you can use that special connection which you can directly connect to your other Moza hardware, and then you don't need to have that USB connection. So the first time you start the Moza Cockpit software, you need to activate the hardware. That's normal. For those who didn't install the Moza Cockpit software yet, there's a link in the description of this video where you will be able to get the tool from. After that, you need to update the firmware, and I need to warn you about this because give it some time, because if you click the firmware manager option, it might take a few minutes before the devices appear. Once appear, click the update all and then sit back and relax. Once the firmware update has been performed, you can click on the aircraft and then go to the MTQ where you can start the calibration. So here it says, okay, hey, you need to make sure that they're connected to each other, which I already showed you in the hardware review. And then you can simply click on start calibration. And then you need to move the joystick a few times, let's say to the front and then back. And you need to repeat this, I would say 3 to 5 times according to the description. So don't forget to do that. it's, well, doable. I would say 3 to 4 times is doable. And then once you're ready, click on, I would say, calibration complete, and then you're good to go. What you see here is that I'm missing some calibration options, but I will explain you in a few seconds why. Once you completed the calibration, you can of course test it out by moving the throttle to the front and back. You can see that it moves around. So that's simply to validate if it works. But besides that, there are of course maybe a few other things which you want to do is, I would say, push it backwards and then see if it works, right? Go into the detent and check if that also works fine for you. Once you've completed that, there are some more things which you need to do. You need to configure the speed brake, how it works. There are a few options. If you click the arrow, you can see button mapping, you can see axis mode, mixed mode, and split mapping. And depending on which mode you configure, the, I'd say, leveler works differently. The same thing is for the axis. The same thing is for the flaps, which can either work in... Now let me show you the other modes. If I switch to, for example, the axis mode, what you will see is that it will really works as an axis, just like the throttles. If I move it up and down, it will simply work as up and down. But as explained already, you can also set it to different modes, right? So we can either test button mode or the mixed mode. Let's do the button mode. And there you will see that it works with buttons. So it works now both with button 4.3 and 3.1. Those are the ones which are illuminating now. So that's what they call the button mapping mode. But you can also go to the mixed mode. In that case, you can use both the axis as well as the buttons, based on my understanding. So that's a really cool scenario. And then I thought, let's also do some testing with the other buttons on the joystick, because there are a crazy amount of buttons on the joystick, especially on the throttle itself. So I thought, okay, hey, maybe I also can test them, right? I can move them around. But for some reason, that didn't work. And the reason why, I didn't connect the throttles correctly to the base unit. So that's something which you need to be aware of. And I'm going to show you how you can figure out if you connected them correctly, yes or no. And here's the difference. Do you see it? Let me show you the previous one. Here it is. And now move again to the new one. As you can see, below the settings, there are now 3 things which you can calibrate. So let's get started. So the first thing we're going to calibrate is the TQF grip mini stick, which is the stick on the back of the throttle, and you need to move it in all kind of positions. And if you carefully look at the right side of the screen, you can see it's moving around. So once you've done that, it should be perfectly centered, as you can see. Then we're going to do the panel axis calibration again. There's no specific need to do it, but since I removed it and put it back again, I thought, okay, hey, let me recalibrate it. So let me also do that. Moving it forward, backward, at least 3 times, maximum 5 times. So do that, make sure that you're doing that. And also read the notes correctly on the screen. And then the next one is, of course, the axis detent settings, which you can click. And then you get this screen. And here's where you can see how the detent works. This is also where you can enable the detent option. And also make sure that you can, and also configure the afterburner position. That's where you can see how much power you give to the engines. So that's really useful, which you can do. Once you've done this, you can click on close and then the joystick is calibrated. Now once you've done the calibration, you can of course test all the buttons within the Moza Cockpit software. I definitely recommend you to do it to make sure that you are sure that all the buttons are working before you start Flight Simulator, where you need to configure the bindings. So if I press a button, what happens? So let's jump to Flight Simulator now and let's see how you can create a quick profile. So we're in Flight Simulator and we simply click the gear, for those who don't know that, and then click on the controls. And that's where you find the controls, including in this case, a weird thing. And yes, this also made me scratch my head a few times, because you can see that the Moza AB6 force feedback base 1 and base 2 are now listed. Now the base 1 is really the AB6 base, and the base 2, that's the joystick or the throttle quadrant, which we're going to configure. Kind of confusing, to be honest, and if you find it too confusing, there's always an option where you can say, hey, I want to rename it. So click the gear and then say rename it. For example, rename it and then say, hey, Moza, not the FFB, but for example, throttle, depending on what you prefer, of course. And then the name will be updated and makes more sense to configure this. Now what's super important is that the joystick under the hood has the same profiles as the Moza itself for some reason. Because you can see I have the airliner control, I've got the GA control, which are kind of deviated or copied from the Moza AB6. I'm not sure what's causing this. Maybe there's, I would say, something with the ID. Maybe that's because they are connected to each other. Likely that's the case. But be aware of that you don't remove the profiles here, because you will also remove them here. So what you need to do is create a separate profile for the throttle itself, because else it will say mess up your complete configuration. So that's also what I did. So I created a separate profile for this, so you can see I can move to it, and I've got a general controls throttle, which is allowing me, for example, to use that joystick on the back of the throttle to move around, right? Can you move my camera around? Besides that, you need to make sure that you are creating a new profile for the airplane's controls. Don't copy an existing profile, simply click the gear and then say create, and then start creating the profile. Now that's of course what I already did, because I didn't want to take you to the full process, but I'm gonna quickly show you on how I configured it. I will walk down slowly so you can easily copy it. And the nice thing is also that I exported these profiles, and I'll put a link in the description of this video so you can download them so you don't have to recreate them. So we'll go to assigned, and that's where you can see which buttons are assigned. So if we talk about the first few buttons, those are all the buttons, or mostly all the buttons, which are illuminated, right? We've got the enablement of the navigation mode, we've got the heading mode, the speed mode, the altitude mode, the flight director mode, and of course the toggle autopilot mode. Now if you want to increase or decrease the reference altitude, or for example change the heading or something else, that's where those, I would say, buttons which you can turn on the base are super useful for. I mapped it in my case to the reference altitude. Now the cool thing is that you can, for example, use the same button where you increase or decrease the altitude. You can also press it. And that's why I assigned it also to the set AP current altitude. And you can also see that I configured a different one to set the altitude current heading. But that's of course up to you how you configure this, but this is the way I liked it. Then of course we've got the trim axis. The trim axis 0 to 100. That's the round button on the side of the joystick which I used. And then we of course have the axis for the flaps, which is completely on the right. The spoilers, which is completely on the left. And then don't forget to also configure the set auto spoilers arming, because there is still that button, that click mechanism, which you will hear if you move the left throttle, I would say, to arm the spoilers. Then of course there's some buttons which I did like to set, but it again is up to you. For example, toggle the landing gear, I assigned those, I would say, nice blinking buttons to it. I also would say made some changes for the lightning, so I can control the lights. And of course the throttle for engine 1 and 2. If the aircraft has more engines, you can, for example, combine engine 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, or 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, depending on what you prefer to do. Then besides that, I configured some buttons to control the cameras. Not that I don't have them on the, I would say, main joystick, but simply to have another option if I prefer to do this. And this works fine and this works nice, but there's one thing which you need to keep in mind. If you, for example, use the fly-by-wire A320 or the other A320 from I&I builds or the A310, you still need to configure the throttle inside the aircraft itself to make sure that the D10 functionality works correctly. As mentioned, I will export these profiles and will share them. And how you can import them is by simply clicking on the gear and then say import, then select the file which you download from the website. And then you've got the joystick configured and ready for use. Of course, you can customize it if you want. For those who want to know how to customize it, really easy. You simply press the button, press the option, then says scanning, and press the preferred button which you want to assign. Now you might think, hey, there are some other things which are Now you might think Now you might think, hey, there are some other things which I would like to configure. In that case, switch to the all option, where you can either search or you can open the category and then figure out which options there are to configure, which are a crazy amount of options. So make sure that you would say set it the way you like it. This is a base setup which you can perfectly use in combination with the A320. So we're here with the fly-by-wire on KJFK, also known as John F. Kennedy Airport, and we're gonna try to take off, but of course we're gonna use the throttle. So I programmed everything already, so I'm gonna zoom out a little bit so we can have a closer look at the systems. So everything should be good, but it's always recommended to validate 100%, right? Because in some cases you might have made a mistake. So let's switch, press the takeoff config. Well, we don't see any warnings here, so I think we should be okay, but hey, who says that I didn't forget something? So let's remove the parking brakes. In this case, let's push the throttles up forward and let's see what's gonna happen. And you can see that they can move them really slowly, and even without them being connected to the desk, it doesn't flip around. One thing which I must say is that I switched the lights to telemetry mode, but it looks like that it doesn't work 100% perfect, at least not with this aircraft. But maybe it works for the other aircraft, so I need to, would say, do a little bit more digging into that. So keep an eye on my channel for more videos about how you can use the lighting functionality for the, I would say, Moza software. You can see we can zoom out. So already good. Push the stick back. Here we go. And the nice thing about it, Moza AB6, which is the joystick I'm using, is that it really, you'd say, is really tough, right? It really gives back that force feedback. And to be honest, that's something which is, I would say, not missing or something. But that would be really nice if that would be part of the, I would say, Moza throttles also. Although I do fully understand that it, would say, might not be technically possible. I'm not sure. Gonna push a little bit forward, gonna move to auto throttle, and then we of course need to make sure that we, let's say, move the throttles a little bit back. So here we go. And now you can see I can also, let's say, move the flaps, although it's on the back. I can move the flaps, and I can also use likely the autopilot functionality if I want, because if I press the AP button, let's have a look at it. Let's first stabilize the aircraft a bit, because you can see we're a little bit slow. Here we go. So we're gonna press the AP button, and in this case it doesn't work, which is a pity. Normally it should work. Likely I've bound it to the incorrect keys. Must be me. Then I'm gonna switch it on manually. Here we go. So from here, right, we can fly using the autopilot, and we're gonna look at the other buttons, because the other buttons, as already explained, you can move them, you can twist them, but you can also push them, which I think is a super cool functionality. You need to keep in mind that you might need to do some tweaks with different aircrafts, and that's also what I'm gonna show you now. Right, so if you press the control option, the one thing you always need to make sure that if you select the joystick, that you select the correct profile. So in some cases what you will see is that it's selected the incorrect profile. In my case it selected the correct one. So I'm really doubting, okay, hey, why doesn't it work? So let me see which buttons I did bind. So can I switch it to assigned, of course, and then I can see everything which is being assigned. So toggle the autopilot, let me double check it. Yeah, it should be assigned. So that's, I would say, a little bit of a mystery, which I need to figure out on why it doesn't work. Now it works. Yeah, it works perfect now. So that's cool. So likely there was someone saying something missing. I'm not sure why it would say worked after reconfiguring it. But this is how it works, and you can see that I can move the throttle really easy. I can also use the other buttons over here, which are really smooth. Of course, I have now that, I would say, kind of connector where I move both the left and the right engine together. But I could of course also move this leveler to the right side, and then I can move them individually. That could be super useful. In addition to that, and if we're looking at the joystick itself, one thing I really like about this joystick is it has a lot of switches and buttons, including those buttons which have multiple functions, and including that one on the right top with all those numbers. This could be very useful, for example, for setting your brakes or something. I'm not sure. That could be one of the options which you might want to use. Let me recenter the camera a bit. Oh, other position. And here you can see the throttle. So the throttle, as you could see, it feels really nice. I can move it slowly up and down. As you can see, it follows nicely on the screen also. And that's really cool. Now, of course, the question is, does it also work for those other things, right? For example, can I move the spoiler correctly? Because that is always a challenge. Because the spoiler is a little bit special. And the reason it's a little bit special is if you're used to, for example, the wing sim control, then you might have seen some other things. But let me first say ignore the... Let me first make sure that the throttle is not correct, because else it will keep, say, bleeping. And also let me, by the way, also check my, say, change the direct to, in this case, to wavy. Here we go. Here we go. See, I not paid attention, and now we need to fly around, right? So that's, say, something which is something which you need to keep in mind. So besides that, while I was talking, right, I was talking about this button. For those who are using, for example, the wing sim or wing control, you know that I would say there's that button which you can pull out. Of course, using, I would say, this joystick, you can leverage that nice functionality which allows you to click it and then move around, and then it will move into, I would say, speed brake mode, which is super nice. So you can use this you can use this throttle perfectly with the A320, as you can see. That's really super nice. Also, I do see that the throttle is a little bit, I would say, too fast, right? So let me reduce it. And this really has to do with, I would say, kind of throttling the joysticks, of course. And that's something which I need to work on, at least on this aircraft, because you can see currently it doesn't make any sense, because it should be in climb mode and then should auto throttle. But for some reason the auto throttle doesn't work 100% correctly. But that likely is me, so ignore this. I would say for joystick testing purposes, this works, I would say, really, really nice. As you can see, it works smooth. Now let me click away the alert, right? It works really smooth. And in this case, what you will see is that since it works really smooth, I can really easily control the engine power. So this is where this short flight with the A320 ends. So let's have a look at how you can set up your profile for the FA18 Hornet. So what I did to make it easy is I created a copy of the airline controls for the throttle. I only renamed them, and the only thing which we need to do is actually, let's say, change the afterburner, right? I need to type it correctly. And you see that the afterburner, you can control either 1, 2, 3 and 4, I would say, separately, but you can also set the toggle the afterburner as one button. Now, of course, this depends on what you prefer to do. If we go back to the Moza software, you can see that the throttle detent mode, let me show you where to exit, access detent settings, that currently it's activated using the enable throttle access virtual button mapping, which means that also buttons are activated. So currently button number 33 and 35 are active, but if I would push it completely forward, it will activate 41 and 42. So what I could do in this case, I could say, okay, hey, I could configure 41 and 42 as the afterburners, but as you can see below is when the throttle is at afterburn position, it corresponds to 75% of the aircraft's throttle travel in game. And this is something which you kind of need to play with, because this of course depends, I would say, per aircraft. Because if we look at this aircraft, let me close this one, you can see that the throttle right goes to max, and if I'm correct there is a button for the afterburner, which I'm not 100% sure about, by the way. So it might depend per aircraft which option you're gonna use. But from flight simulator perspective, again, if I go to escape, I can also do it a different way, of course. Press this option and then I can exit it, and then press the throttle and then search for afterburner. I can also say kind of configure button number 1 and 2 to those individual buttons which I showed you here, right? 41 and 42. So let's do that for 100% sake. So we're gonna do not scan, but we're gonna press this button, which allows you also to select all the buttons, and you can see that there are a number of buttons. And the most difficult thing is if you connect it directly to the Moza AB6, it almost, between brackets, becomes impossible to figure out which button it is. So then what you can do is, what I already did, is press this option and then I would say move the leveler to the front. So let me also do that. And now you can see it map button number 41, because let's say in this case I set both throttles connected to via that switch, so both throttles work the same. So enough talked. Alright, everything is set up, at least I do think it's set up. So let's see if we can take off using this jet fighter, which is of course, I say, another challenge. So resetting the view, removing the parking brake, and for those who want to have that nice, I would say, profile, look at my website. There's a link in the description of this video where you can download all those profiles. So I'm going to start a recording also for the throttle. So here you can see the throttle. So let's say, let's push it forward. And then of course always a matter of just watching if it works. Yeah, it works. Oh, and we're going airborne already. Making sure that everything goes okay. I'm not really fighter fan, right? So I'm also can't fly really fighter, and I can't say that I need to really push the stick hard to avoid that I'm going into a stall mode, because that's of course not what we want to reach. Now we can say do gears up. So let's see if the afterburner works, right? So I'm gonna push it now. And you hear it? Afterburner is now active.
Boeing X-ray Golf Sierra. Did you copy?
And we're climbing like crazy, which is not what I want. And here you can see how difficult it is to, say, fly in a fire. So I'm gonna reduce the throttle.
Alpha Sierra X-ray Golf Sierra. Frequency change.
And here we go.
Washington Center. Boeing Alpha Sierra X-ray Golf Sierra is type Boeing ACOM.AC_model FA18E.0.TDS. 2 miles northeast.
And now things are completely going crazy, of course. So likely I need to configure the AB6 a little bit better for this aircraft. Here we go. This goes a lot better. Now let's go into the afterburner again.
Boeing X-ray Golf Sierra. Radar contact 3 miles southeast of Andrews. 5300. Altimeter 29er.
And I can really move it nicely. And as you can see, I would say all those buttons will still work. Well, the lights are not working. Still need to figure it out for the throttle, because it should work, because the lights on the other joysticks are working. But likely I need to tweak something. But again, keep an eye on my channel, because I will record a video about that specifically. So now let's push the throttles back. A little bit too much G power. To showcase you which settings you can make for the lights, let me switch to the throttle over here. You can switch it to, in this case, telemetry source, and then you can make changes. But for some reason it doesn't work. You can also set them to device. That will be based on the device. So you can say flap. And then we need to fly back to... Oh, well, I was already too late. Sorry. So luckily Flight Simulator has recovery mode. But if I would now move the flaps, at least I would expect the lights to illuminate. But as you can see, lights are also not illuminating. So maybe I'm doing something wrong. So it's something I need to figure out. But that's good. So also for this one, right, I can remove the, let's say, this switch on the joystick or on the throttle. And then I can control the levelers, let's say, independently. Now what you see is that, let's say, the handles over here are, I would say, well, not 100%, but I would say pretty close to the real, I'd say, throttle in this aircraft, in this FA18 Hornet, which of course super nice. Then since I now move them separately, I can also go into, let's say, full mode with one of them or both of them. And again, here you can see that the throttle stays pretty stable on the table, right? So on the desk, no problems. Also, I can move around, can look around.
Boeing Alpha Sierra X-Ray Golf Sierra, Washington Center, Squawk 0476.
Squawk 0476, Boeing X-Ray Golf Sierra.
Reach the view.
Boeing X-Ray Golf Sierra, radar contact 2 miles northeast of 0 Mike Delta Niner 10,000.
So super nice and super useful. I think both for the FA18 Hornet as well as for the A320. So let's round up this review. So what's the final verdict? The Moza MTQ Throttle Quadrant is an absolute space-saving champion. It's not too big, as you could see, you can place it easily on your desk. And the nice thing is that you can use it both for civil aviation as well as for military flight sims. It's modular because you can simply, let's say, exchange those handlers, right, for a Boeing one or for an Airbus one, or maybe you simply prefer to use the default ones which are for fighters. The takeaway: if you want a singular, ultra smooth throttle setup that can easily transition from a commercial airliner flight deck to a fighter jet cockpit without cluttering your desk, the Moza MTQ is a powerhouse choice. It allows you to exchange those throttles as already mentioned. However, the downside, I think, of it is that you need to buy them separately. Besides that, if we're looking at the, let's say, quality of the joystick, I'm a little bit still, let's say, concerned about those, let's say, levelers for the D10s. I didn't have major issues with them, but it feels a little bit that they could potentially break. But maybe that's just me, let's say. I'm also, I would say, of course, testing some other joysticks and using some other joysticks. And it does feel a little bit weak, but that's my, I would say, own opinion. And I do assume that Moza, because they're releasing a crazy amount of hardware also for other sims like racing sims, that they have tested this carefully. So, takeaway: if you want a singular ultra smooth throttle setup, then this is definitely something which you need to take into consideration, especially looking from the price perspective, but also look at the, let's say, space it takes on your desk. There are bigger throttles, but they consume a lot of, I would say, space on your desk. And also this one can still be connected to your desk using those desk mounts if you want, but keep in mind that you need to buy them separately. So here ends this video. If you found this review useful, then feel free to post the comment box below this video. Also, if you think I missed something, also do that in the comment box below. And keep an eye on my channel for more videos about this nice throttle, because I still need to figure out how to get those lights working. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you back next time.